Hey, good evening y buenas noches. Thank you for coming to this board meeting on a beautiful Tuesday evening. And we're going to start this meeting at 7:17. I apologize for the 17 minutes that we have delayed the start of this meeting. We're going to start with the agenda that you all received, hopefully 24 hours in advance. If you didn't receive it because your email is not part of the database or for any reason, please make sure you let us know after that you were not sent the contents of this meeting and the agenda on time, please. Establishment, the item number 1 on the agenda, establishment of a quorum of directors, and all of us are here. So we have a quorum. As you know, this board is a 4-person board, should be 5, because along the way, Mr. Randall Litton, and I applaud him for that, decided that being on this side of the table was not for him at his age, in his time of his life, and the devotion that he provided was not being appreciated, which I always said, you never are on this side to be appreciated. But I want to reiterate that I appreciate what Mr. Litton did for the board, and I appreciate the fact that not one person offered to fill that vacancy during the time that he left in the last 6 months. Not one of you. Not one. So, well, you're not too sure about anything, Mr. Stevens, and I appreciate that. But you are not one. So I don't know if you want to talk about somebody else, but I know that you did not offer to be on this board replacing Mr. Litton. You said that you're thinking about running, and now you are, and I appreciate it. So now, for the next board, we have Mr. Stevens, member of the community, and other members of our community running. There's a 7-person race for 5 spots. But all I'm saying is that I appreciate what Mr. Litton did, and I will appreciate what you will do when you're elected. So, that being said, we're going to say, item number 2, was there proof of notice of this meeting? So yes. Then, those of you who have the agenda, I'm going to switch it. Take it upon myself to change it. And we're going to go straight to the meat of the current season chapter of the Bristol Tower saga. This is for me, season 2, episode 11 of the saga of the Bristol Tower, for me. If the seasons go by being the board director president, this is season 2, chapter 11. Chapter 12 will be next month when I hand off at the annual meeting my tenure. So, that being said, and I'm happy that Mr. Stevens is here, flew all the way from Mexico on very short notice to be in this meeting. We're going to go straight to 2 items that have been a source of anger, passions, concern for many residents. And I think it's a very important subject, and it's all about the waterproofing, necessary repair that this building is, as determined by the experts that were hired by the board, is necessary. And then, after we see what's necessary, we will show you what the board is presenting as an option. So, since that is going to be the meat and bones of this meeting today, I thought that we go straight to what we think is necessary. Before I do that, I want to, by a show of hands, as if we were in camp, how many people have read Mr. Stevens' letter about the waterproofing? Okay, I say 75% read Mr. Stevens' letter. How many people have read the engineering report that was done by this building, okay, now that went to about the same. I appreciate the fact that the people who are showing up here are driven by the passion and the need for this building to be in the correct path. And I am hoping that the decisions that are made today are based on fact, based on engineering, based on value, perceived and real, and that emotions aside, we let this board decide what's necessary, and then let the residents decide what's optional. That being said, I'm going to hand the baton to our engineering firm, M2E. We have a good representation of this company who, as you know, have done a engineering report that's building on top of another engineering report that's building on top of another engineering report. Because I mean, some of you who have history of this building know that the waterproofing theme has been going on for at least 12, 10 years, and at least 3, 4 boards. So what this board did from day one was to see what was very important for this building to do, and we identified the waterproofing as that because of the reports from before. We were blessed with a water leak 1 month into our tenure that we had to take care of as a building. Then next year we were blessed with a hurricane. So that being said, in the 2 years that in the private sector, in the things that I'm used to accomplishing in 2 years, I want to say that I and this board is way behind in making the decision of what's necessary for this building. Because, and that's not an excuse, I think with the reports that we saw and the checklist and the guidelines that we followed professionally to see what's necessary, because it's going to affect my pocket, your pocket, then I apologize for this meeting happening so late in the game. That being said, please welcome the M2E engineering firm who is going to thoroughly explain what's the problem, what's the solution. And then we'll have a conversation about that, and then we're going to go back and see with our architects and our engineers that have done the proposed enhanced renovation that is going to be building on top of this waterproofing should the residents decide to do it that way. Thank you, and with you, I leave Esther Calle to present the rest of the team from M2E. I'm going to hand it to the president of the company, who thought this meeting was interesting enough and important enough to come and present himself the findings from the engineering firm.
Thank you. No, I'm mic'd up. Thank you very much. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I've been coerced to actually have black things put here so I can stay on focus. And you can see me in replay in those long evenings that you have nothing to do. My name is Misha. I am the president and owner of M2E Consulting. I have together with me today the team that has been so far involved in this project, my senior VP, Mr. Vladimir Markovsky, my department head, Esther Calle, my engineer, Enrique Mendoza, and Elena Tepavak, who is together with Armando Erazo in the support team. I'm going to try to make this as painless as possible and as understanding as possible. I would just ask, please, for you to reserve your comments for the end because there will be a Q&A, and that will give the opportunity for everybody to voice their concern at the same time rather than elongating this or possibly going on a tangent. So if you would kindly just note any comments that you might have. We don't have an outer limit. We can stay here all night if you want to answer your question, but it would be useful if we can finish our presentation first. The Bristol Tower Exterior Innovation Project, first, I think you deserve to listen a little bit or hear about our firm. Our firm is 15 years old, and it's a local consulting firm. We have been in business for 14 years now, and we have served this community successfully over that period. We have extensive experience in this particular type of work, and I will show you the example of project we are currently involved in the past. And more importantly, we have actually been involved in condominiums in your direct neighborhood who can vouch as to the quality and involvement of our firm. So Santa Maria Condominium is my client for over 20 years. We have done the actual turnover report for them, and ever since, every single engineering endeavor on the building. Michael Harnett has probably my number on speed dial by now, but it is an example of how we like to say for our clients, we like to be the last engineering firm that you hire and keep us for anything that you do in the future. Our business model is based on repeat business and client satisfaction. 1050, 1060 Brickell, we have not only done the turnover, but we have facilitated a settlement with the developer where the entire building on the exterior face was actually redone. 500 Brickell Condominium, not only did we do the turnover, as well as the reserve studies and the minor redo, such as the entire resurfacing of the pool deck. Sound familiar, right? But we also had an extensive project of Chinese drywall removal that was completed successfully. Finally, Skyline, your direct neighbor, is also a client of ours. Where else do we do these things that we propose to do for you, and where do we draw the experience to make the conclusions that we made? We were involved in the W Hotel in Fort Lauderdale on the entire waterproofing redo of the arrival deck, pool deck, and all of the planters. At the Bow Harbor Tower, we were involved in a similar planter and deck arrival and pool deck renovation. Ocean Palms Hollywood is currently our client on this very type of project, and Turnberry Ocean Colony retained our service as recently as now. These are just an example of the most recent ones we have. You're welcome to go to our website that shows you the plethora of other clientele that not only hired us but kept us for this particular type of assessment and work that we're proposing here. Besides the actual replacement, we also have with us a member of the Brito Cohen Architects team, which will talk a little bit about further what could be done with this property should you choose to do it. This is an example of the design work that they did for a property that was completed, and that gives you a flavor of the possibilities that you might have here. The Bristol Tower was built in 1993, that's 25 years from now, and the reason why I say that is in order to give you a perspective of what is expected to happen in a building of this age. There was no major exterior renovation. I understand that there were paint jobs that were done, but what is normal in the course of this aging of a building of this size and this location, water leaks, paver issues, and concrete damages occurred. There were several waterproofing investigations that were performed. Back in 2008, our design consulting did an assessment of the waterproofing condition at the building. Later on, in 2016, our firm was tasked to do an assessment of the pool deck and the driveway that yielded a result that was kind of non-conclusive, and because there was no extensive destructive observation, those conclusions needed to be confirmed. We were then rehired in 2018 to make a more in-depth assessment of the conclusion that we made in 2016 that heeded the actual report that we publish now. What does the report say? Well, there are certain areas of the building that we selected based on what was told to us. If you see these green dots, those are the dots that indicated the areas where the pool deck was actually investigated in an intrusive way. Simply put, we lifted the cover and we observed what was below. I will show you pictures in a second. This is how it looks when you lift your finish. And you have the delaminated coating exposing the deck as well as a failed coating. In several of these locations, similar things were observed. Actually, no coating because it was washed off and emulsified, which is again misspelled, although I tried to be corrected. I speak with an accent, but I try not to write in one. It's LS. Emulsified in plain English means that it actually reverts to a liquid state and gets washed off. As a result, you have areas with no coating. Similar area where the emulsified membrane showed and the delaminated waterproofing was again observed, and the same thing, the delaminated coating and the failed coating. These were different locations that were actually selected because you want a sample of each typical geometry at the deck to be observed. So you want to have a corner condition, you want to have a field condition, you want to have near to a planter condition, and we selected those locations based on that. The rust stains under the tile indicate that the steel that is at the top of your slab is now becoming exposed. Not good, because the steel is there not to be exposed, but to actually reinforce your concrete. The only way to actually assess it is to lift the waterproofing, chip it, actually replace the rebar, and complete the concrete that is affected. Similarly, delaminating waterproofing in other locations where you could actually lift it with your fingers. And, sorry. The second areas that we were asked to assess was the driveway and the planters assessment. The yellow dot indicate all of the locations that we observed. I'm going to be redundant and I'm going to repeat these several times because I understand that one can say, well, these are the green dots, where is the rest of the field? We select those areas that we sample based on our experience of observing these particular type of materials. So we go to typical installation locations and we observe not only where it could be the worst, but sampling throughout the field. Again, the corner, the field, next to a planter. 100% of all of the observed dots failed, either because delaminating, or actually non-existing, or emulsifying, but essentially every single of those dots showed failure. Delaminated waterproofing here. Now in the driveway, you can actually see us being able to lift it, and it's peeling. Below, again, the rust stains that I addressed previously in the pool deck are appearing here as well, showing that the steel is actually becoming exposed. Again, degrading coating that you could lift with your hands, and here bubbling and blistering membranes, which would show that moisture was already entrapped below the membrane, and as it evaporated, it pushed the membrane outward. Now, that water needs to go somewhere. In this case, the water likes to go down. So you have water intrusion through previously repaired areas. You have water intrusion around drains, and water intrusion and stalactite just below the area of the driveway. This is what happens to steel when it expands in presence of moisture. It increases in volume, and it pushes the concrete that covers it and spalls down. Hopefully your car or your head is not below it. Similarly, you can see here around the crack that water has already started with efflorescence, which essentially means that water carried with it some of the mineral content that it encountered, which means that some of the rust stains may be from steel, we don't know, but water actually went through the entire structural member. So what were the findings? The waterproofing system is beyond repair. Why is it beyond repair? By the time that you would try to investigate every single small dot, I'm referring to dots, or locations, there is no reason that in our professional opinion you would find anything different from what we observed in the location that we actually lifted the cover and observed the waterproofing. And again, 100% of those locations failed in different modes of failure, but they all failed. So beyond repair means that by trying to track additional areas and patching on a patch per patch basis, you would actually try to chase the leak, so to speak. Your membrane is at the end of this lifespan. And essentially what that means is that it makes absolute economic sense for maintenance and, more importantly, for warranty purposes to do an entire replace of the membrane. Simply put, if you repair 3 patches, the person that repaired those 3 patches will only warranty the 3 patches. And guess what happens if a leak occurs? The first thing they're going to tell you is that it didn't occur because of the 3 patches that they did, but from somewhere else because the water always finds a way to go there. So based on the result of our inspection, the legal minds will appreciate this language. It is my professional opinion, within a reasonable degree of engineering certitude, that the full waterproofing needs to be replaced. By the way, anybody wants to know what a reasonable degree of engineering certitude is? It's most likely than not. That's what it means. So, canopy assessment. We're going now up. Done with the floor, let's talk about the canopy. The blue dots indicate the areas of the canopy that we observed. Canopy in your case means metal frame and a fiberglass coverage. We observe obviously the front, where the porte cochere is in the front of the building, as well as by the porte cochere, and as well as on the water side by the pool. So what did we see? Well, the paint was damaged and the panels were stained, and wherever we looked, we've pretty much observed the same thing. The rusted frame below the paint that was already chipping off, as well as stained panels that were there. Same from above when you see the stained panels. So the canopy assessment is that the unsightly fiberglass panels should be replaced and the metal frames to be cleaned and repainted. Your fiberglass panels are made of, you guessed it, fiberglass. And fiberglass has this capacity or property that when exposed to UV, aka sunlight, it recrystallizes, becomes brittle. And essentially, those of you who have fiberglass boats, know that they need to repaint it over time. It is because to prevent its exposure to UV, it will actually become frail. And again, pretty much 25 years later, they are at the end of their expected time. So this is a project that would make absolute sense to combine with the waterproofing project, mainly to minimize the impact on the ownership. Because I know that you're all thrilled to have a bunch of construction people ballading yourself through your building, as well as the noise and dust that comes with that. And therefore, it is typically combined with other work that can be done at the same time so that the disruption is kept to a minimum. The pink granite assessment was a task that we were assigned based on the observed modes of failure of the attachment of the actual granite panel. What you see here is a separated cladding. Cladding tile, use it, simple word, clad. Essentially, your tiles are losing their capacity to adhere to their substrate. And you can do 2 things. You can attempt to reattach them, or you can remove and reinstall them. How do you reattach them? You can reattach them typically mechanically, so that you don't have to separate them, and that means you drill in 4 corners and you put pins, or you put stainless steel anchors that have actually like a bolt on the end for each and every of the tile. Aesthetic consideration, some people like it, some people don't. But the danger exists that the cladding will actually separate and fall, so it needs to be addressed. In addition, when you redo your waterproofing, which we believe you should do, you need to cut the bottom 8 to 10 inches in order to return the waterproofing vertically at the location of the cladding, so that particular tile will be affected, regardless of whether you do something with the top cladding or not. Again, the blue arrows were actually done in the field on the location that were showing signs of loose cladding, and in each of those, they were separating. Around 30 to 40% of the tiles were affected when we saw it. We saw also crack grout, and they separated from the substrate. So we strongly recommend that you address these embodied tiles by either replacing them or reattaching them. Again, this is a 20-plus-year-old granite, and it would be probably difficult to find a new granite that would blend ideally with it. But that's more of an aesthetic consideration, not an engineering one. The proposed remediation for the pool deck driveway planters, as I previously said, is the removal or replacement of the waterproofing, as well as the removal or replacement of all the finishes that lay above it. As far as the granite cladding and canopies, it is the removal or replacement of reattachment of the cladding, of the granite cladding, as well as the fiberglass panel, and clean and paint the canopies. Why are you doing this? I like sometimes to make a parallel between buildings and humans. A building, particularly in South Florida, is no different than maintaining the health of a human. There is a time for exercise when we're younger. There is actually time to do nothing when you're really young. Then there is a time for just exercise, then for more vigorous exercise, then for light medication, then for stronger medication, then some maintenance surgery, and it goes all the way to aesthetic surgery if you choose so. What happens to those who don't take their aspirin in time, who don't consider that they need to do some exercise, is that typically, instead of doing maintenance medical procedure, they end up having a heart attack. And the doctors that do those assessments don't open your body to tell you you're going to have a heart attack. They go and they listen to your heart, and based on their experience, their professional experience, they make the assessment whether you have to do aspirin or put a stent or go to open heart surgery. The more you postpone it, the more likely you're going into the stent open heart surgery camp. The more you take care of it early on, and if you take your aspirin and your exercise early on, this is less likely. We are kind of the doctors of this construction community of ours, and without having to open every single cavity here, that's the assessment that we make. You're now the 25-year-old building where certain level of maintenance are beyond just the easy aspirin. You need to actually go to certain kind of medication. And this medication that we prescribe is what we believe is the medication that you need. Those repairs that we discussed were actually outlined as a mandatory expense, but there is an opportunity, should you decide to actually do upgrades. Why would you do upgrades? You would do upgrades for two reasons. One is to further maintain and increase the value of the asset that you own, because newer products that come on the marketplace have amenities and looks that are much more interesting to potential buyers than units in older buildings. So typically, when we do this kind of work in buildings of this nature that portray themselves or project themselves as luxury condominiums, they use the opportunity to do certain decorative or aesthetic improvement to the building that would make the building competitive in amenities and looks, and at the same time improve the quality of life of the residents. So what would those be? The team from BC Architect that is here can discuss this in detail, but I'll just graze over it so that you can get the flavor of what could happen. The guardhouse, the porte cochere, the tennis pavilion, and the pool deck. This is the before on the left side, and this is the proposed after. You will see the enhancement in the materials, as well as the lighting, and the entire approach experience to your property. This is how it could look. As far as the existing condition of the valet, this is the left before, and this is the after, where it would have a completely different arrival sense at the time that you come to the property. The tennis pavilion, left is existing, proposed concept to the right. This is how it could look for a shaded area by the tennis. And finally, the summary of the existing condition and the proposed concept by the pool deck, where you would have a actual covered and shaded area that would be restaurant-like, and on the other hand, like a club lounge area that would provide under a trellis a shaded area to have more of a communal look. So what I would call mandatory repair, the medicine that you have to take, would be estimated today at $6.2 million, depending on the scope and final bids that you receive. For $2 million more, you could have the enhancement that were proposed in this particular slides, and it would allow then the building to be more competitive in the current market area. The financial impact, I was told to pass the baton from somebody from the financial committee.
That's it. Hi, I'm Ed Detman. I'm the chairman of the Finance Committee. I was asked to put together on very quick notice, what the assessment would look like and what our possibilities may be for payment of that. So what we're looking at here is a calculation of each unit's assessment based upon the like kind, which was a 6.2 million, you'll see right here in this column, versus the upgrades here. Now, these are the total per unit assessments. This is the unit type on the extreme left, but if you look for your unit number, you'll see it along in this unit number column. So this kind of gives you a sense as to what we're looking at in terms of the cost per unit from 6.2, the like kind, versus the 8.2 upgrade. And here's the difference. Now, one of the things that the board has tasked us, the Finance Committee, to do is to look into possibilities of financing this assessment. Not everyone wants to pay it in a lump sum and would like some time. So we have been looking with help from FSR at financing opportunities. We've been in contact with, well, right now we have 4 banks that responded yesterday with new bids on interest rates that would allow our residents to pay over a 36-month period. I ran a scenario here, and again, I had to do this last week before I knew what the rates. I ran a scenario of what would be the monthly payments over 36 months at a 4.5% rate. In actuality, yesterday they reported the low bidder was at 4%. So the actual monthly payments are going to be a little bit less than we're showing here. But again, the like kind would be, this would be the monthly payments over 36 months for the like kind, next to the upgrade, the monthly payments, and the monthly difference between the two. Now, we've had a lot of discussion. The last time we brought this scenario up, people were concerned because, again, it's a line of credit to the HOA from the bank. There's no lien on anyone's unit. There's no lien on the physical structure of the building. So it's not going to affect anyone's credit union. It's not going to affect your individual unit. The only collateral they have is on our payment of this special assessment. That's how it will be repaid. So don't be concerned that the building is going to be on the hook for this loan, because what it is only an opportunity for the residents to pay over 36 months as opposed to paying all up front. This is something that once we decide whether we're going to go like kind or upgrade, then we have to bring before the residents approval of this lending facility. And again, you can choose to do it or you can choose not to do it. If you decide to finance it over 36 months, you're going to be paying anywhere between 4 and 4.5% interest on that. If you want to save the interest, you pay it all up front.